there, my name's Kelsey, and today we're going to be making a simple Flappy Bird game. So this is a beginner level project for those who are new to Scratch because you're going to already need to know how to create costumes, sprites, backgrounds, as well as know how to use and create operators, events, and use broadcasting. So let's get started. All right, so we're going to start by creating a green rectangle to serve as part of the backdrop. So we're going to have grass lower down, but then we're going to have bushes in this lighter green color a little bit higher up. So I'm putting this green down as a base. Then we're going to go in and create some circles of different sizes. We don't need to have them arranged just yet, but we're going to be placing them wherever we want them for the bushes. You can make some bigger and some smaller if you want. You're really free to do whatever you want for this section. So you will see that here we have a couple bushes, and now I'm going to make some grass for the bottom. I'm going to make this a little bit darker, and let's go about that color. So now I'm going to go in and add my grass. And for this example, I don't like how high all the bushes are, so I'm going to group select them like this and move them down a little bit by pressing the down arrow on my keyboard. And finally, I'm going to make my sky. So I'm going to choose a blue color that I like, and then just draw a big rectangle, and then put this to the back. I'm going to make this a little bit lighter so that it's a bit more faint. And there we go, that's our backdrop complete. So now it's time to make our sprite. I'm going to start by creating a start button. So this is simply going to be a rectangle. I'm going to make it a light reddish color. And then we are going to fill it with the word start. If you click on this arrow, you can change the size of it to make it easier to read. Then I'm also going to center this button and give it an outline because I think it would be easier to see when it has an outline. You can also adjust the thickness up here. And there we go. We have our start button. So now that we have the backdrop and the start button complete, it's time to make the bird. So I'm going to start by creating a new sprite. I'm going to title this one Start Button, and then Sprite 2, I'm going to title Bird. So let's get started with making the bird. The first thing I'm going to do is select this gradient because I want my bird to go from a very bright yellow color to a lightish orange. So you don't have to do this. I just do it because I like the way it makes the bird look, but you could definitely do it any way you like. So I'm going to start by creating a circle for the body, and I'm not going to put any outline on it. The next thing I'm going to do is create the eyes. So we're going to start by selecting a solid color and just a white circle. And then as far as an outline, we're just going to go black to make the eyes stand out. Then we're just going to make a circle to act as the eyes. I'm going to move this over to the side of the bird. And then I'm going to take my pen and choose a little bit of a bigger size. Not quite this big though. Let's do about 50. And we will change the color to black. This is going to be the bird's pupil. I'm just going to change the size again to make it a little bit smaller. And there we go. And now it's time to make the beak. So I'm going to use a bit of an orangey reddish color for this. I'm going to go a little bit more red. And then what you'll do is you'll just create some sort of elongated ovals. And these will be the bird's beak. I'm going to use 2 of these to create the beak. And then we can also take one to work as the wing. You're going to need to change the color of it, but there we have it. We have our bird, and you'll see if we size it down to about 40, you'll see it will look a little bit less strange. And then to make the second costume for this bird, we're going to duplicate the first costume and just change the angle of this wing a little bit. I'm going to tilt it up and move it up a little bit. That way it looks like the bird is flying if you alternate between them fast enough. So now that that's done, it's time to make our obstacles. All right, so I'm going to start by creating the costumes for the obstacle sprite. We'll start with a rectangle to act as the main post that supports the obstacle. Then on the end, we're going to create a slightly thicker one. This will just overlap the edges slightly and make it easier to see. I'm going to do the same thing to make one for the top. We'll make sure that it's approximately the same size and add another rectangle at the end that overlaps just a tiny bit. These obstacles will be the main obstacle for the game. And then we can use this arrow tool to grab the obstacles and make sure they're in line with one another. And again, make sure all the components are the same size. So we're going to make sure that is complete and then select these components and move them up to give us a little bit more room for the bird to pass through. So you'll see once this is done, what I'm going to do is duplicate the costume and select these and move them down a little bit more. So I'm selecting all of these blue components and moving them down to the middle. And then I'm going to do it again and select them all and move them down to the bottom. This will make different heights of our obstacle so that the bird has to move up and down during the game. So now that this is done, it's time to get onto the code for the start button. We're going to start by selecting a when green flag clicked block. Under this, all we're going to do is choose a broadcast block and create a new message. In this case, I'm just going to call it reset. Then we want to define what happens when the sprite receives the reset message. In this case, we want it to go to and change from 3628 to 00. And then we want the sprite to show itself. And finally, what we want the sprite to do is when it's clicked, we want it to broadcast a new message. In this case, it's going to be called start, because this is what's going to start the game. And finally, we want the sprite to hide itself. This is because we don't want it to be seen during the game. So now that this is done, it's time to move on to the code for the bird. I'm going to start by selecting a couple when I receive blocks from the side here. I'm going to start with 3. Under the first one, we want to select the reset message. And in this case, we want the sprite to hide itself and go to 00. This will make sure that it's centered, but not visible until the start button is pressed. Underneath, for this reset one, we're going to change reset to start. In this case, we're going to create a new variable called score. We're going to let this variable be visible up here so that the player knows what their score is. Under this start, we're going to start by setting our score variable to 0. Then we're going to switch the costume of the bird to costume 1, which you'll remember is the one that it's showing right now with the wings straight out to the side. Finally, we want to make sure that we show the bird so that it will actually show up on the screen. Then I'm going to grab a wait 1 second block and a forever loop. Inside the loop, I want to set the sprite to the first layer so that it's not overshadowed or covered up by any of the other blocks. And then I want to use an if statement to check if it's touching another color. So I'm going to use this sensing block to check if the sprite is touching. And here we're going to grab the eyedropper and select the color of the grass. If so, we want it to broadcast reset and wait. And then it will stop all running code. What this whole section here will do is basically ensure that if the bird ever touches the ground down here, the game will not continue. Although what I am realizing now is that the grass is quite high up on the background, so you'll see I'm just going to go to backdrops and move it down. That way it won't be quite so high up in the game. So now we're back to work on this when I receive. We're going to change the message to start again and create a new variable called gravity. This one we don't want to show, but we're going to start by setting gravity to 0. Then I'm going to grab a forever loop and an if-else statement. Inside the forever loop, but outside the if-else statement, I want to change y by, and then go to variables and select the gravity. This will make sure that the bird is always being changed by whatever the gravity value is, whether it's positive or negative, we'll make it go up or down. And then for the if, I'm going to check if the space key is pressed. If so, we're going to set our gravity variable to 4. Otherwise, I want to set the gravity variable to negative 0.4. This will make the bird fall if the spacebar is not pressed. Once these blocks are completed, we're going to go to the Events menu and select a When Space Key Pressed block. Inside, we're going to grab a repeat block and change the 10 to a 2. Then, what I want to do is wait. I'm going to grab 2 of these because we're going to need them. And we're going to change the time to 0.1 for both. Then what I'm going to do is change the costume. So because the bird started with costume 1, I'm going to change it to costume 2, and then back to costume 1. So you'll see when we do this, it will make the bird's wings flap. All right, so now that we're done with the code for the bird, we're going to move on to the code for the obstacle. We're going to start by going to the Events menu and selecting a When I Receive block. We're going to need a couple more of these later on, so I'm going to drag out 2 more. For the first one, we're going to choose the start message. Then we're going to set our score variable to 0. And then we're going to create a new variable called speed. This will control the speed at which all the game's components move. For this game, I'm going to set speed to 8. A lower number will make the game go faster, meanwhile a higher number will slow it down. You can adjust the difficulty of the game this way. Then I'm going to choose a wait 1 second block and select a forever loop. Inside the forever loop, what we're going to do is create a clone of myself, which will create a copy of our obstacle sprite. And then we're going to wait, and instead of selecting a specific time, I'm going to use an operator and the division operator. And in the second slot, I'll do 2. In this first slot, we're going to select our speed variable. This will make sure that it waits an appropriate amount of time before moving out onto the canvas. And now we're going to move on to this next When I Receive block. We're going to start by selecting the start message and go to Sensing and select the Reset Timer block. This will reset any timers that the game is using, and then we're going to wait 1 second. This will just space everything out properly. Next, what we're going to do is grab a forever loop, and what we want it to do is forever wait 2 seconds, and then we're going to go to variables and set the speed to, and here we're going to need a couple of operators. We're going to need a subtraction operator and a division operator. So we're going to set the speed to 8 minus, and then we're going to go to variables and choose score divided by 10. This will make sure that the speed is appropriate for however well the player is doing. And now we're moving on to this next reset block. We're going to go to looks and just simply select a hide block. This will make sure that the obstacles are hidden unless the game has been started. And now it's time to choose what happens when a new clone is created. We're going to start by selecting 3 of these When I Start as Clone blocks. Under the first one, we're going to choose a forever loop and an if statement. Then we're going to go to sensing and check if this sprite is touching the bird. If so, we want it to broadcast reset and wait, and then afterwards it will stop all running code. This is the same code, you'll notice, that we used for this bird section over here. And now that that's done, it's time to move on to our second When I Start as Clone. We're going to start by setting a location for this sprite to go. In this case, I want it to go to 280 and 5. This will make sure that it's set up in the correct place. You'll see it will appear in the very corner over there. I want it to be a little further out, so I'm going to do 300. Then what we're going to do is switch the costume to, and we don't want a set costume, so I'm going to do pick random 1 to 3. This will select a random costume from our obstacles costumes that we created. Then, because remember we hid it up here, we're going to select the show block. Then I want this sprite to glide, and because we don't have a specific time, we're going to use our speed. So we're going to glide speed seconds to, and then here I'm going to do negative 300 and 5. This will just make sure that it will move across the screen slowly. And finally, what I'm going to do is delete the clone so that it no longer appears at the edge of the screen. And now that that's done, we're on to this final When I Start as Clone block. In this case, what we're going to do is wait, and then we're going to do speed divided by 2. So I'm going to need an operator, and we're going to insert 2 in the second spot, and the speed bubble in the first one. So we're going to wait speed divided by 2 seconds. And then we're going to change the score by 1. This will make sure that anytime the bird passes through an obstacle, the player's points increase by 1. So now we're done with all of this code for the obstacle. So let's try run the game. I'm going to start by clicking the start button, and then you'll see we can use the space bar to keep the bird up in the air. You'll notice that every time we pass through one of these blue obstacles, the score increases by 1, but if we let go of the space bar, the bird falls down and the game ends. Hopefully you've had a lot of fun creating this project. If you have any issues with it, try review the code that we've written. You can go back through this video, or you could read the attached article. So I hope you enjoyed this project, and good luck making it.